welcome again to your January NAL ED Talking Circle. Before we get started, let's go ahead and get disclaimed. Oh, well, that didn't work. So here's our disclaimer. This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises Incorporated. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred. All right, now that we've got disclaimed, let's jump in to our agenda today. We're going to start with some reminders and announcements. Also, we're going to be doing a lot of talking around sort of the behind the scenes of language assessment, what it takes to actually create a language assessment. So I really hope you folks will be sharing. We're going to start with an example from one of your fellow grantees, and then really kind of get into the sharing about how you folks have created or are creating your assessments. Again, this agenda topic really comes from our previous talking circle where there was high interest in you folks sharing sort of how you actually created and are managing and implementing your assessment. And then again, at the end, we'll be going through some upcoming events. These are your OIE program leadership. We have Dr. Donna Sabas-Burns, who is your interim NAL ED program officer, as well as Gabby. And she, I don't know, I don't see them. They might not be joining us today.
I know both are under the weather. And so one was going to try to get it together to be able to make it, but it just might not have happened.
Yeah. Well, I wish them health for sure.
Yes.
And then, of course, I am Oleni. I am your OIE technical assistance coach. And let's move forward with the reminders and the announcements. Okay, it's APR preparation time. This is really the time of the year where you want to sort of look over and start to prepare yourself for the coming APR season. You want to be able to make sure you are reviewing your GEPRA and performance measures. Make sure you have the appropriate data collection methods and tools so that you can report on both of your GEPRA and project measures. Also, you want to take time to review your data collection tools and methods and make sure, around the data that you're collecting. Even though you may not have a complete set of data, are your tools and methods collecting the information that you need to report your GEPRA and project measures? Sometimes we get into creating assessments, and when we sort of get into it, we realize that it's actually collecting a different type of data. While that's important, again, you want to make sure that the data that's being collected can really be used to report on either your GEPRA or project measures. The other thing is, this is a great time to check in with your budget staff. Take time to reconcile your expenditures you have to date, including drawdowns and budget category and line item expenditures. You also want to make sure that you are identifying how drawdowns are being made and any challenges related to the budget. You will be receiving emails, not right now, but coming up for your APR preparation webinar that will be occurring on March 29th. I really highly encourage you to invite your budget staff to attend that. We see that when grantees do, we get really strong budget, both narrative as well as the optional budget reporting form submitted. And so we really want to encourage you to include your budget staff. Also, just a reminder that APR are due on April 28th. Again, we're going to have the APR preparation webinar where we'll really get into the nuts and bolts of completing and having a successful APR on March 29th. All righty. And then here's just a little reminder about credit on materials. I know a lot of you are doing some fabulous work. You're creating workbooks, publications, reports, maybe even some videos. What you want to do is, if you are using the NAL ED grant funds for that, you want to make sure you are including a disclaimer language, and also as you publish and disseminate any grant project materials. Right there on the slide, you see the language, the contents of this, and it's the type of publication, whether it's a book, report, or film, were developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. However, those contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government, and then it has that information there. You see this a lot when you see maybe some other reports or publications. Is like on the inside of maybe a workbook, or maybe it's on the back side of the workbook. You want to make sure, though, that you are acknowledging the funding source, as well as creating this, providing this disclaimer. If you'd like to use the department's official seal, we have information there. I will put on how you can get access to that. I'm going to put this email in the chat so you can go ahead and request to be able to use the logo from the Department of Education. Okay. Also, some very exciting news. Don't forget that the Office of Indian Education Student Artist Competition is happening this year. The theme for this year's competition is I Am the Future. Students can submit their interpretation of this theme via art, writing, and video. And you can see there the grades, as the grades accessibility and eligibility for the different forms of art. The art category can include various mediums, including painting, drawing, mixed media, photography, textiles, please, and cultural arts is also included in that. The writing category should really be focused on the theme and be 1 to 2 pages long, a narrative essay. And then also we have a video category. And this video category can be a personal performance piece, no longer than 3 minutes. So students should submit their entry by March 15th, 2023. And I think we can put a link in the chat so that you can go ahead and get the link to for students to submit. And winners will be announced at the project directors meeting in June, which is a great, oh, thanks, Casey and Sarah. They're on it. Our team is on it. Thanks for putting that link so that you can have your students submit their art, sorry. So that's a great segue into our next item. Just a reminder, project directors meeting is coming up. It is June 6th through the 8th. This year, you can invite your entire team to participate. If you remember, well, for those who were with us last year, you could only invite up to 3 members, but now you can invite your entire team. And so we're really excited. We really want to encourage you to invite your program staff as well as your budget staff to participate in this year's June 6th to the 8th project directors meeting. Just a reminder that it is mandatory at a minimum that project directors do attend. But before we jump into sort of the rest of our sharing, we're gonna warm up our talking circle muscles, and please come off of mute. And we'd like to ask and harvest some of your ideas that will help us plan a project directors meeting that is relevant and responsive to your needs. And so again, I want you to come off of mute and share. The first question I'd like to pose to you and get your thoughts on is, what topics do you want to see covered during the June project directors meeting? Again, please come off of mute and share. We're actually taking notes on this.
Hi everyone. My name's Dara. I'm from Navo Prep. I really enjoyed the project director meetings in the past. They've been really, I think, empowering and encouraging. I think the date is a little bit later this year, which is really helpful because last year it was right in the midst of a really stressful ending into the school year. I think graduation was going, like, it was just there, it was nuts. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate the June date on the director meeting. Some areas for us that I know we would benefit from, our finance office would love to do some kind of like G5 deep dives, and some support and just making sure that they are getting that they're doing their part. And I think hearing best practices or even just doing some trainings on the business office side. I know our business office staff would love to attend that.
Great, thank you. Great idea. Any other suggestions about topics that you'd like to see at the June project directors meeting?
Hi, Olani, it's Brandon in Anchorage.
Hi, Brandon.
Hi, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Do we have a report due in the spring?
Your APR?
Yeah, is that due in May?
April.
Oh, it's due in April. Okay, all right.
Let me
Okay.
let me go back right here.
Oh, sorry. I joined the Teams meeting for some reason that was in the invite.
Yeah.
So
So-
sorry, Microsoft has gotten carried away and keeps adding Teams meetings to things against our will.
No worries. Is that
No
Sarah?
problem. Yeah, that was Sarah.
That is the voice from beyond.
Yeah, no problem, Brandon. That's I mean, other people were joining in too, so it's great to sort of take a step back and make sure everybody gets that information.
I didn't mean to derail it, but I was wondering about the report because I was wondering if that could be integrated into the project directors meeting, but I see the date switches, so it's all good.
Yeah, okay, cool. Anyone else? If not, we'll move on to the next question. Again, really, these questions are to harvest your ideas so that we can make this PD meeting really relevant and reflective of your needs. So are you doing a program or process that you would like to share with your fellow project directors? You might be shy and not want to like sort of stand up and say, I have this fabulous thing going on, although I do know that you guys do have some fabulous work going on. And you know, a lot of the sharing during project directors meeting doesn't mean to be like, oh, I have all the answers. It could have been like, I had this challenge and this is how we work through it. And so it doesn't have to be from a place of like, oh, I got all the answers. But it's just an opportunity to share. So maybe there's something you would like to share that you've learned, or again, a challenge that you face that you come up with a solution. You can go ahead and put in the chat, or again, you can come off of mute and share.
So it's Brandon again. I don't want to hog the conversation, but I do have something that I could offer up.
Awesome.
And so I have a colleague here with me, Betsy Watson is in the she's not officially a part of our grant personnel, but she's my new colleague in the world languages department. And anyway, one of the things that we did and are still working on finalizing in our current grant is a series of parent engagement and education workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some consultants helping us with this based on work that they had done in Minnesota with Hmong communities, Hispanic communities, and a little bit of work with Ojibwe communities. And what we were trying to do or hoping to do was to sort of revise those materials through an Indigenous lens. And so while we have a lot of work done already, I think when you talk about challenges and such, these are two Caucasian women, scholars and professors that pulled in a lot of research, and it was very valid research, and from very, very reliable sources. Many who are scholars in the Indigenous world. But anyway, what Betsy and I kind of learned was, this is way too much information, and we need to break it down into more meaningful chunks that are, that are not scary. And so the other piece is, even though it was sort of designed around our Alaska Native and Yupik communities, the idea was really to make it more valuable and available to any Indigenous group, to sort of adjust the content, if you will, and personalize it or make it more place-based. So people in Hawaii or people in,
Right.
Wisconsin could use it based on their tribe or whatever. So we would be happy to share that. It's definitely not perfect, and we have to make some adjustments to it, but we would be happy to share that with the group.
That's great.
Hey, this is Donna. I'm sorry, Alana, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Brandon, hey, this would be, I'm wondering if it's a big enough project that you could do for the PD meeting. A segment, is that something large enough to do? That could be turned into a presentation?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, just something to think about, because that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, and actually, Betsy and I would probably love this, is I appreciate, Alana, you saying, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not bragging about this. We definitely need to revise it because it is still way too academic.
Yeah.
And while it's should be based on, research and data, it really needs to be user friendly, and it's currently not user friendly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you have two things to share, right? One is the product, but the other is the process, right? So the process that you've learned, that you identified that it was, you need to be smaller chunks, it need to be in more appropriate language, less academic, like you said, and the process you go about to actually achieve that. So it sounds like I have you on my list. And so it sounds like a presentation that would be really beneficial, not just for the product, but also for the process.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Kevin and I are both here from Navajo Prep. Mr. Boleyn is our director of the Dniepizat Institute, and he's done some phenomenal work through the NAL grant in developing assessments. And I was thinking, and Kevin, you two come off mute and we can talk through this together, but we were kind of just briefly thinking about maybe we could share our assessment journey and some of the transitions between how we balance oral language traditions and written assessments. And Kevin, I know you were thinking about using our mountain model. I don't know if you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in the chat, I sent some just some screenshots of what we're doing.
Nice.
So what we did was we for our assessments, we do pre, mid, and post for all grades. And what we're seeing is, I think that I have the number here. When freshmen come in, they're generally scoring about 24%. That's a wide spectrum of language learners. We have some that come from within, the deep res to the border towns, all the way to students that are coming in from Maine and Montana and Idaho. And so we're getting such a wide spectrum of students that we have to create a curriculum and assessment to where we have to take consideration of their level of education coming into the school. And so 24%, would fall into that area where it says entering.
Yeah.
And so the terms that we put in there at the very bottom, novice, in the meaning this is their first chance or their first time learning. That's how we started off. Then entering, meaning they're listening, they can hear it, they're hearing little bits or whatever, but they're not responding. Then the next portion is beginning. Now they're standing up, they're engaging. Now they're starting their journey. And so we're using the mountain songs and prayers, their teachings from that, as a means of culturally responsive assessments. And so I'm going to make a graphic about this so students can visualize this and see where they're at in the journey. Meaning they're walking towards their goal, right? Yeah. They're almost reaching the mountain. They've reached the mountain, and bridging. And then expanding, meaning they're walking up the mountain, and then at the top, they've climbed to the top of the mountain. And so that's how we're creating these brackets, or there are these levels.
Yeah.
And so it's helping students to understand where they're at along their journey as lifelong language learners. And so what we're seeing, this is just there's 3 pie charts. Beginning of the year as freshmen, they're coming in with, so they're coming in those levels with black, gray. I had to add 2 additional colors of gray, reds, the maroons and reds. And so this is where our students are at. Midterm, you're starting to see more color. You're starting to see more blues and greens and yellows. By the end of the year, you're seeing that they're progressing. They're not proficient, but they're progressing. Progressing through their language learning. And we're having students that are having such a phenomenal mindset change in how they're viewing themselves as Navajo students. We've had students that when they came in, they were so, I don't know how to best say this, they're so colonized in terms of their identity. Now, this is just within the past 5 months. This is personal stories I've heard from parents. Their child is now yearning for more language and culture, that they're asking their parents to buy them jewelry and clothing. And so now they're completely changed their mindset in just the 5 months. And so, it gives me goosebumps and chills just hearing about it again. But that's where we're at, and that's how we're doing assessments. Soon, we do have 3 language teachers on board now. From when I first came, it was just 2, but now we have 3 language teachers and myself in our language department. So we're growing each time, and it's thanks to the NAL grant with this. But we're going to start to use this information and assessments to help guide now tier 1, tier grouping into classrooms. And so what we're doing with what Dara was talking about is, initially, we are very skill-based assessment, multiple choice, matching. But what we want to get to the end of the year is concept and oral-based assessments, to where they're no longer doing the multiple choice, they're no longer matching, but we want them to engage in conversations. We've already created the rubric based off of our International Baccalaureate rubric. And so we have that, and that we're going to start to implement now, about Q3 to Q4. So that's how we're doing our program, and it's just taking time and getting everybody on board to go with this. So Dara.
I think one thing I would add that is really important piece of the story is like that progression from the NAL 1 or NAL 20 to NAL 22. So we were really grateful to have been awarded 2 cycles of the NAL grant. And it was with that first NAL grant that we were able to take Kevin out of the classroom, the place he loves, to do some of this administrative curriculum design work and create the director of the Dinipazad Institute position. And that was the primary use of funding for the first NAL award we got. And we're really grateful that we were able to get external funding to continue that position and now move into NAL 22, which is where we're developing this exchange program with New Zealand. And I remember Dr. Donna, when we were first talking about this initiative, and you were asking, like, does the assessment conversation connect with this exchange program in New Zealand? And really it comes back to this idea of what Kevin's talking about, which is the identity development. And I think the mountain model really clearly explains, like, we're not just assessing students' language development so that they can see where they land on a chart. it's that identity piece of who am I in my journey of language usage and internalization. So we really see this next step of our NAL journey into the New Zealand exchange with Indigenous schools, Indigenous IB schools on the South Island, to be the way that we're going to help students really see themselves as language speakers and also see that place globally, and understand that it's not just in your own Indigenous community that you use language, and that it connects with you wherever you go. Because as a college preparatory school, we know that we're preparing many students to go outside of their communities, into some of these more highly selective schools where they won't have the same numbers of Indigenous peers. Of course, we also really support our students and push them towards tribal colleges, but I think that could be a way that we show, I guess, the real life usage of assessments, not just as a grade or a book or something like that. So thank you, Kevin, so much for sharing.
Yeah, Dara, this is an excellent example, and I'm so excited that you took the time to share, you and Kevin. So thank you very, very much. And again, it's such a unique piece to be able to do back-to-back grants, and then this will be that implementation of the exchange. And so we're really looking forward to see the great stuff that you guys are doing. So again, document so you can possibly share to all of our PDs, because this is great work that you guys are doing. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has the potential of sharing both the product, but also the process, and Daria, you were talking a lot about the process around, time and funding and staffing and, how you sort of put those pieces together, connecting to outside other Indigenous communities and using a cultural knowledge, culturally based sort of framework, and actually thinking beyond just language for, assessment for language preservation purposes, but beyond as like language as a living, necessary tool for students' preparation for the world. So I have you on my list. So thank you very much for sharing. And we're going to get later on in our talking circle, we're going to get more into assessments. And so please continue to share. But I have one last question that I'd like to pose. And if you're thinking about your program and you're thinking, well, maybe let me think about it a little bit, you can always email us at oie@seiservices.com if you have a program or process that you'd like to share during the June PD project directors meeting. And then my final question is there a speaker or organization or a fellow grantee you would like to hear and learn from? And so this can be, maybe you've seen a YouTube, or maybe you've gone to another conference and heard this amazing speaker or seen this program, or maybe through your networks outside of OIE, you have heard a great speaker or an organization that's doing amazing work, or even a fellow grantee, either in NAL or maybe in another OIE grant program that you think that your peers would like to hear from. Again, you can come off a mute or you can throw that information into the chat. Anyone know of a speaker or organization that we should reach out to for the PD meeting?
Are you looking for a keynote or for a session presenter?
Both. Yes and yes.
I'd like to just throw out the name of Mary Paltola.
Okay.
She's the first Alaska Native congressperson in DC.
That's right. I thought that name sounded familiar. Do you have a connection to her, Brandon, or could you put us in contact with her?
Yes, I can put you in contact with her office.
Okay, thank you. Others?
I'd like to throw out the name of Susan Paskman. She's a language advocate from the interior part of Alaska.
Awesome.
And her life's work is language revitalization.
Yes. Yes. Great. Others, anybody else? Again, this is not your last chance. We will, as you're going along through your day, you may come across somebody who really you're really into, really sparked your interest. Go ahead and you can email us. Casey put our email there. You can email that to us. We're going to be collecting this and we are getting into the planning time for the project directors meeting. So now's the time to get that to us. Awesome. Thank you so much for participating and sharing your thoughts. We're going to now turn and dig a little deeper into sort of some of the behind the scenes around the language assessment. And we're going to have some of your peer grantees share what they have done in order to just start the conversation, but then we're going to open up for everyone to share again. So before we get there though, I want to get your talking circle muscles moving. We have a poll that will be popping up regarding your own language assessment, just to kind of get an idea about where everyone is at. This first one, let me see if I can grab it. One second. This first one is really, let me see, this is it. Okay, there we go. This first one is you can do you might fall into several of these responses. So you can go ahead and pick anyone that sort of most reflects your language assessment. Where are you with your own language assessment? You can go ahead and choose that. As well as the second question is, what type of language assessment do you use? Again, you might use multiple ways to administer your assessment. And I'll let you finish that. This is the choices for the second question on this poll. Again, what type of language assessment do you use? We'll wait a little bit because we have a little less than 18 participants, and right now we have 6 participants who completed the poll. So I really want to encourage you to go ahead and take a couple seconds and complete that poll. All righty. So it looks like, as it relates to the first question, that a majority of us, 3 out of 7 of the participating in the poll, say that you administer a language assessment last year, but have not done one yet this year. Okay. Also, it looks like several of you have also administered an assessment in fall of 2022. Okay, great. And then when we look at the types of language assessment you're utilizing, it looks like 7 out of 8 of you who participated in the poll utilize a spoken test, which really makes sense since a lot of our languages are oral and we really want our students to be speaking as well as written. Also some listening tests, which is an important piece of language acquisition. Oh, thanks, Cindy, for providing some ideas on presenters in the chat. Awesome. Okay. Individual tests, in-person tests. Awesome. So now we kind of see what everybody's utilizing, the types. We now have our next poll that will be coming up, and it are open-ended questions. Let me go ahead and get that. Oh, there we go. it's popping up. So the first question is, what about your language assessment works very well? And so you could go ahead and do a short answer to answer that question, as well as what about your language assessment is challenging? Again, that is another short answer. I know when our school created its language assessment, one of the challenges was the human time and resources necessary to administer, as well as to make sure that we were getting that inter-rater reliability, which basically means that every rater is rating the student with the same sort of idea or rubric in mind. Awesome, great. Looks like some people are, well, we actually only have one of our participants participating in the poll. So we'd really like to hear from more of you. Again, a short answer about what's working well related to your language assessment, as well as what is challenging. If it's maybe easier for you to come off of mute, you can go ahead and share that by coming off of mute. No? Alrighty. All right, well, let's move forward.
Would you like me to share those results on the screen for you?
Yes, please. Great.
Hi, this is Alana.
Hi, Alana.
I didn't get a chance to, somebody interrupted me, so I didn't get a chance to, like, answer.
Yeah.
But we do mostly speaking, not really written. We're taught to, because, you know, in my home, we were just spoken to. And I know OIE requires some kind of curriculum on paper. But we were taught never to be paper Indians because we confuse our children by the grammar that we have. So that was one of the challenges in teaching at the school is we have, say, for instance, we have a word identifying squirrel. So we would say zeep, and to the grammar, you would put the silent T in front of the rest of the letters. So that was one of the challenges. I had to just tell them, don't look at the word, just say it, just pronounce it like how I say it, because you're not going to get it until you're way older and you really understand the grammar part of it.
Yeah.
However, I think it varies in grade, because when we taught it, we were teaching it, the only grade was the 6th grade that got out of the elementary students. They knew about grammar and stuff. So then they said, well, can we sound spell it? And I said, if it's easier for you to sound spell it, then go ahead. Because we really don't have written documents. And who's to say it's right or wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, one of the great things about the NAL ED grant as it relates to like your GEPRA measures, as well as your curriculum, I mean, you really have a broad sort of berth around like creating what makes sense for your community. And so if it is, I saw a lot of you have an oral assessment, if it is students talking and talking with an elder or talking with the instructor, that can be a form of assessment. And maybe the instructor has a rubric that they're completing out, that you really can make it an oral curriculum as well as an oral assessment. and make it relevant and related to the cultural practices of your tribe and your peoples. So that's one of the great things about this, this NAL grant.
Cool.
So I'm glad you're taking advantage of that, Alana.
Yeah, I'm trying to. We're
Awesome.
yeah, we're working on our stuff. We already developed it. It's just when we start, we're ready to, you know, go with it, like maybe in a couple weeks or so.
Yeah, yeah. I usually when you look at like federal funding sources, it has a broader understanding around like, you know, making assessments and curriculum relevant to the communities. Where I see a lot of times about requiring paper and actually like numbers connected is sort of when you get to the state or local level, where there are other requirements. And so that's, again, I just want to reiterate that that's one of the great things about the NAL grant, is that it is so flexible. And so really, I want to encourage you to take advantage of that flexibility. And so I'm going to go back to sharing the screen. I'm going to steal it back. There we go. Oh, can you folks see that? Alrighty. And so we were going to have Casey, who works with Alana in developing the Shoshone Paiute assessment on, but she wasn't able to make it today. So at that time when we get there, Alana, if you want to share, please do. But again, we're just going to sort of tee up these grantees sharing, and it's just to open the conversation. And so, sorry, for today, we're going to have Lisa from Waduka Dotting. And again, Casey was going to be joining us from Boise State University. She's working with the Shoshone Paiute tribes, Alana, and to develop their assessments. So let's get into this. Really, you know, as it relates to, again, the NAL, when we're talking about language proficiency and progress, that directly relates to your first two GEPRA. Again, you can see by looking at this GEPRA, it provides, you know, a lot of latitude as far as how you are defining proficiency and progress, as well as the methods in which you are assessing that. And I think hopefully today we will hear from a lot of you and hear the various ways that you are doing that. Already, when we were talking about the PD meeting, we heard from Navajo Prep, and I hope to hear from you guys throughout this talking circle about the work and the methods that they're doing around assessment. So it'll be great to hear what everybody's doing. But first, just to sort of kick our conversation off, I wanted to ask Lisa from Waduka Dotting if she could share what process was used to define proficiency and progress. Lisa, are you there?
Lisa was here and then she has dropped.
Oh, shucks. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm hoping she's going to be able to get reconnected because she was here.
Okay. Well, I have some notes that she sent me, so I will go and share the notes that she sent me until she can hopefully get back on. So grade level proficiency have been established, and progress is measured by sub-levels within the ACTFL guidelines. The guidelines have determined novice, intermediate, advanced, and superior levels, and there are 3 sub-levels: low, mid, and high. So they assign ratings in 4 areas for the modalities of speaking and listening, fluency / text type, grammar, vocabulary, listening, and comprehension. And there again is that key skill around language, we always talk about the speaking, but also there's the listening and hearing and being able to comprehend. And so the second question I asked her was, how did you create an assessment that measures your definition of proficiency and progress? And she said, again, that resources were developed by the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages, that's ACTFL. They help them to define their Ojibwe specific proficiency guidelines for Wadukadading Ojibwe language immersion schools. Other resources consulted during the development of this assessment included the resources provided by CAL, including junior ratings scales, the student oral proficiency rating scale, and the CAL, excuse me, oral proficiency exam and student oral proficiency assessment rating scale. Much of their current rating scales closely resembles, she's got a lot of acronyms in here, the COPE SOPA RS, and they assign ratings in 4 areas for the modalities, again, of speaking and listening, fluency, text type, grammar, and vocabulary and listening comprehension. The ACTFL model for oral proficiency interview has also been really instrumental in implementing their assessment. And so that's how she answered these 2 questions. And I'm just going to share some of the tools that they created. And then I'm going to open it for everyone to share their responses to this. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these tools. Again, you can see this one is looking at novice, and you see those different areas around fluency and text type, grammar, vocabulary, and listening. And this is where they're digging into sort of the different sub-levels, the novice low, novice mid, and novice high. Now we're looking at intermediate speakers. Again, the different levels, fluency, text type, grammar, vocabulary, and listening. So you can see what they would be looking for in that level of speaker. And at the top, you can see their definition. And then lastly, for this section of sharing, again, you see their intermediate low, intermediate mid, and intermediate high. So these are just examples of what Dukadading is using. I want to go back to that slide where I asked Lisa those questions, and I want to take some time and pose those questions to you. Again, this is really just you sharing. And yes, I would like someone to chime in. You could go ahead. Related to Wadukadading.
Can I jump
This
in?
is kind of, oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
go ahead. Brandon, go ahead. I think you were talking.
That was me, so sorry
Oh.
to
Oh, sorry.
bombard your guys' meeting. My name is Michael Sullivan, and I previously worked for Wadukadading. And Lisa asked me to join the call today to kind of explain some of the things
Yes.
that we utilize there with the development of assessment. So we got 2 different things that we assess there. Adult language proficiency. So for our language learner, adult trainees, right? If they're teacher assistants or even some of our seasoned immersion teachers, being able to track their proficiency growth throughout their experience. So that's one level of assessment, but then the other level of assessment, what I think you guys are talking about here has to do with your students and the children. So what we've done at Wadukadading is kind of take the mainstream approach and whatever it is we can get from the mainstream approach and then customize that to better suit our learners. So those of us who have done language assessment at Wadukadading, we took the trainings, right? There's the SOPA and ELOPA program through the Center of Applied Linguistics, CAL is the acronym, but they offer a training you can pay for, and it's a asynchronous thing where all your modules and such are online, like a CAN course, and you move through it and you submit assignments and stuff like that. But that's the SOPA ELOPA training. The difference between SOPA and ELOPA has to do with age. So there's different recommended strategies for assessing student language learners depending on how old they are. So the ELOPA is the early language oral proficiency assessment, which I believe goes up to like kindergarten or first grade or something like that. And then the SOPA is the next level up, like second grade through eighth grade. And that SOPA stands for Student Oral Proficiency Assessment. And just to give you a little idea what that looks like. So what we do is we identify pairings, ideal pairings, and usually the pairing is made up of a child that's more proficient than the other. And that's usually based on age, right? If we take a fifth grader and we pair them with a fourth grader, chances are the fifth grader is a little more proficient. So we assess the kid in pairs and we treat it as a sort of game, so to speak. So it's kind of fun. We'll have little prompts and there'll be different tasks that's associated with the assessment. So it'll start off as like a warm up, just a conversation, kind of icebreaker. And then you'll move into well, how I did it is I'd move into a sorting task. I'd have a big stack of pictures. And those pictures could be, when I started, it was our wild rice harvest. So it was step one of the wild rice harvest all the way to wild rice on the dinner table. And every step that needs to happen along the way, we had a picture of the whole process. And so the sort task was, here's a bunch of pictures of somebody ricing, put them in order from start to finish. And they'd organize them in order and usually get it pretty good, get it pretty right. And then you'd ask them, okay, now tell me about it. Tell me about it. So then they go through the whole process of the rice harvest and they talk about it best they can. And you always have the more proficient kid go first because that provides the sort of model for the younger ones. So the younger ones kind of watching and listening and, oh yeah, kind of remembering the words. And then once it's their turn, then you kind of mix up the pictures and they had already seen it done, right? And they'd already got to listen to their partner there. So it provides them a little more prep for their turn.
Yeah.
And then there'll be other things kind of built into it, and I switched it up season to season. So if it was springtime, instead of using racing pictures, I'd use pictures of our spring sugar bush harvest. So we tie up maple trees and make maple syrup here. And usually school, these kids' school day, these students' school day during sugar bush season is they're out in the sugar bush from 9 in the morning until they got to get back to the school to catch the bus home. So all day long in the sugar bush prepping this stuff. So it isn't anything that is out of context for them or weird for them. It's something they do every day. So they're typically perfectly comfortable talking about. And then, you go through the trainings, the language assessment. So in graduate school, I took all kinds of classes on language assessment and how to do it, how to read it and all that kind of stuff. And as you go through the process, what you're trying to do is get the participant, or in this case, the child, to talk as much as they can, right? So usually when we'd sit down for the interview, I'd tell them, we're going to talk for a little while here. I'm going to ask you to do all kinds of stuff. And I brought some goodies. And my advice to you is to just talk as much as you can. And when you're done, I got some suckers. Usually I had, so caramel apple suckers that stick to the kids' teeth. I'd have a big bag of them ready, and kind of reward them all for their participation. And it's something the kids looked forward to. And it wasn't, like a high stakes kind of test or anything. It feels like a game, the kids enjoy it and they get to hang out with me and get candy. So for the different tasks and such, they'll kind of guide you in your training, a language assessment, to kind of be able to probe and say the kid mentions something. If he's talking about racing and he says, yeah, they're pulling out to where the rice is, and you say, oh, what's that thing you used? Or, you know what I mean? You can ask them little probe questions to find out how, in what detail they can elaborate on these kind of things. Because everything they say is what you're going to be using for their rating, in the end. And then for us, all these are recorded. And then when it's time to rate them, then we'll transcribe the interview. So it's really, really time consuming, I'd say, and pretty intensive detail, but we'll transcribe the whole interview and then analyze it. And that's where the rating comes from. So as you mentioned already, we've borrowed and taken from mainstream organizations like ACFL and CAL, but really take what they sort of had as a model and then create our own guidelines, as you showed on the screen share there, breaking it down for the novice sublevels and intermediate sublevels and the advanced. And we're sort of plateaued. That's the current shape we're in right now. We're plateaued at our advanced high, because in order to build the next level up, like our superior or our distinguished level speakers, what we need to do is run this same sort of assessment on our L1s, on our elders, and base our
Wow.
higher level proficiency levels based on real speech, rather than just
Yeah.
out of the blue, well, an advanced speaker should be able to do this or that, or
Right.
actually having the data from our L1s to support whatever the difference is that we articulate between, difference between the advanced and the superior level
Right.
speakers. So in all of our assessment rounds that we did, we would do a fall round and a spring round, and our school goes up to 8th grade currently, and we never had an 8th grader that didn't hit one of those advanced categories,
Right.
whether it was vocabulary or their text type, their fluency or their comprehension or their grammar. They hit advanced in at least one of those categories every time. And they say the first indicator of proficiency is text type. So if you ask a child, what'd you do last summer? And they say, I went swimming. That's that we consider a sort of novice level response. And you got to ask more than one question, of course, to determine somebody's proficiency level. But it's usually the size of the response will be your first clue as to what level they're coming in at. And you don't want to ask a child to perform a task or ask them an unfair question that they're not prepared for. So usually the best interviews are with people as the interviewer who have an established rapport with the kids, because it's really, really awkward to bring in some outsider to come in and assess your students, whereas they're more likely to perform to their fullest sort of potential with somebody that they're already comfortable with. So I guess that's all I,
Yeah.
and then the final task of the interview is what they consider the wind down. So say it wasn't a too hot of a performance by a student or whatever, then you bring it down to a level where they can elaborate and feel good. So you'll ask them something easy in the end. And then so that way the students all leave the interview feeling like they did a good job, and they all get their reward in the form of candy or whatever it is. But yeah, there's definitely taking the trainings, through Cal and ACFIL and everything else definitely helped in creating our own sort of authentic form of assessment and rating that isn't entirely based on, the sort of Western mainstream approach. But yeah, take what you can get from those mainstream organizations for sure. They've been at it a while. So.
That's amazing. I love how you utilize those tools to sort of be sort of the launching pad, and then you created that. There's just so much good stuff in there around best practices, just amazing that you're connecting it to, the sites and the projects that they're working on and the vocabulary they're developing, that you're using peer. It's just so many good things. Anybody have any questions or want to share what you're doing as it relates to, the process you use to define proficiency and progress, or how you created your assessment? Go ahead and come off of mute. Nobody? I know you guys are doing a lot of work around assessments. Any questions you have?
This is Alana.
Hi, Lana.
I'll share a little bit about what Casey and I came up with for the Shopai the students at the Wahi High School. We're similar to what the first tribe is doing. We're using that same format kind of, but like I said, we were talking about doing an oral to see if they can say it, fluently. And then, but then some of it we'll probably do on paper. I think it kind of threw us in a whirlwind when we were not kind of like being active there for a couple weeks. But yeah, so we're just kind of doing that process, and we finished, the questions. We're just now focusing in. Last Friday, we started to train our teachers what to ask. And what kind, because this is going to be, the first one is going to be a pre-test.
Mhm.
So, and the teachers at school are very helpful, and they've been practicing with the kids already.
Mhm.
My understanding, because they have the materials from last year, what we are using. So hopefully we'll show signs of improvement on our GIBRA forms and stuff.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Anybody else want to share the process you've used to define proficiency and progress and or create an assessment that measures your definition of proficiency? I don't want to move forward until everybody feels like they've had a opportunity to talk and share. If not, we'll move to the next question that both sort of talked about. I mean, definitely Dr. Sullivan talked about it as far as the type of assessment. And one thing I wanted to ask everyone is, do you have to train your assessment proctors? I know Dr. Sullivan said that he has to do, they use fifth graders. And so is there a training that the fifth graders do, or are they following a script? How does that work as far as, starting that assessment process with actual students?
So I know we're still in the process of training people to administer the interviews or to do the actual assessment. I think classroom teachers are your best suited for it, so long as they're proficient enough, I guess.
Yeah.
One thing we have trouble with is I heard your comment earlier on multiple raters,
Yeah.
or doubly rated, and that's the real tough one for us because we don't have a ratings crew. So when I was doing assessment there, I was the
rater.
assessment crew, so I was doing the interviews and the ratings and teaching. But I think in like a year's time from now, we'll be in better position to have them at least doubly rated, because they're definitely the status or the prestige of your assessment definitely goes up the more reviewers you have, the more raters you have.
Yeah.
My word of advice to everybody is you want your assessment to be communicative, right? You want it to be communicative. You don't want to have it be just vocabulary focused. They're just pronunciation focused. They're just X, Y, or Z focused, but really communicative, like how well can they perform in a spontaneous, unrehearsed setting? Because otherwise, all you're doing is assessing how well they can memorize or how well they can do this. But it's got to be that sort of spontaneous communication in order for it to be real language use. Otherwise, what you're assessing isn't necessarily language proficiency. So that's my word of advice. And the Cal class, like I mentioned, I think it's like periodic, like where it's not always offered. So if your organizations are interested in that, it's the Center for Applied Linguistics, and then SOPA ELOPA is the name of the training or the name of the course or the assessments that are that are used. And one thing I will let you know about that training is I told you about the wild rice harvest and the pictures I use for the sorting task. Well, part of my training with SOPA and ALOPA, you have to upload your examples, right? So you have to upload the materials that you're going to use into their module so they can review it and kind of approve it. And when I submitted that racing sorting task, the feedback I got was, this is way too hard. You're running this with a third and a fifth grader. There's no way in heck they're going to be able to talk about this kind of stuff. And they didn't know our kids. You know what I mean? So right off the bat, they were trying to sell our kids short, saying, "Oh, your kids, you know, I'm not going to let some lady in Washington, D.C. tell me what our kids know and don't know." You know what I mean? Because, no, you let me worry about what our kids can do with the language. You know, I think this is a perfectly applicable and realistic task for them. So you got to kind of beware too, you know, of mainstream influences, and we're really suspicious of the mainstream, right? And we have years and years of reasons why we are that way. But yeah, so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, because they don't understand, right? Your kids are like living that, right? They're in that rice field. They're like living that whole experience as a project, as a place of learning. And so you have these high expectations for your students, which I think is great. And I mean, if you don't know, because I didn't know what this word meant, was inter-rater reliability. Basically, what that means is that for every rater, for every person who is providing or proctoring the assessment, they are all rating the response sort of in the same way, which is difficult to do particularly when you are administering an oral assessment. And so so you had fabulous inter-rater reliability because you were teaching and you were creating the assessment and you were also scoring. So you had fabulous inter-rater reliability. But when you start to add on more proctors of the assessment, then there are like, you do need to put that into your professional development for your proctors. It's great to have teachers, again, be the proctor, because then they take the results from their assessment and they actually can apply those results, you know, immediately. And they can adjust their curriculum based on the responses for students. So you're really getting where that assessment results are being responsive and being applied in the classroom. However, it does take time, and there is, you have to figure out a way to do that. If anybody is utilizing teachers as proctors, could you share some of the maybe strategies or operations that you're utilizing? I know for example, in my school, we would have the teacher proctor in certain hours of the day. And at that same time, we would have a cultural practitioner come in and be with the rest of the class as the teacher pulled out individual students to proctor the oral portion of the assessment. Anybody else, any other methods that you folks are using around sort of the operations of the assessment administration?
I can share a little bit about what NAVO Prep is doing. So as you heard from Mr. Boleyn earlier, we're doing quite a bit of support to our teachers so the assessments developed outside of the classroom for the pre, mid, and post exams. And Kevin has the assessment on an online platform. So it's administered not only with the teacher, but also it could be administered by another staff. What I really want to share about is kind of what we're working towards, which is our as an international baccalaureate world school. We're working to really ensure that that our coursework aligns with international baccalaureate standards so that our students can get credit for like higher HL classes, or so like that they kind of align and are recognized. And one of our big, I guess, struggles or work right now is in seeking authorization from the International Baccalaureate so that they will recognize our language class.
Yeah.
Because what that would do, it would help our students to have the chance to take like a Navajo class as part of their IB diploma. So it's kind of a process that we're going through, but what we've learned through the International Baccalaureate is their focus on external evaluators. And so we're working to develop these assessments that we could then bring in community members and local experts to help us to administer and then also to create. So that's kind of where we are and in our process. I think the assessments that we've been creating are excellent, and it helps us to measure students' progress towards within, especially grades 9 and 10. And then as they get into grades 11 and 12, that's when we're hoping to really implement this International Baccalaureate Navajo language exam, which would serve as, in IB terms, I think they call it the IA, or the internal assessment. So we're really working to kind of align our model to their model, and then telling them like, hey, your model needs to be expanded to create some space for Indigenous languages. And that conversation's been really, we have some people in the IB who are really working towards helping us to make this a reality.
Yeah, awesome. Way to blaze that trail into new roads for other Indigenous language. Thank you, Navajo Prep.
Sorry, can I add on to that?
Yeah,
Please.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks, Star. I'm actually on my way to on another presentation, so please excuse the car noises. But one of the things that we saw is that we still need skill-based assessment. You know, we still need that paper form of assessment. We need to document, you know, their progress in a way. So again, beginning their pre-test and mid-year test is heavily skill-based. By the time we get to quarter 3, we're moving to comprehension, and inside that online platform, we can create videos of a native speaker asking the question, and the students hear the video, and then they upload their own verbal response. And so we do have a difficult time, you know, preparing the students, teachers to proctor the exam. Generally, we measure about 30 minutes to do the exam, but 20 minutes of that exam is just setting up the students, you know. And so there's a lot of wasted time, and so this is just one way for us to be a little bit more efficient, and students can do it on their own time or in the classroom. One of the other ways we also utilize our Navajo after-school tutor, and she also is certified through the Navajo Nation to be one of these proctors. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible, but without taking out the oral component. So their final exam will still have the skill-based assessment, but it's going to be heavily oral response. And how we determine proficiency is they have to, I believe there's 2 words, it's spontaneous and non-rehearsed. So we're going to give them multiple questions, different questions that each student will answer. And so that's how we would define proficiency, is being able to conjugate the complex verb systems that we have and having it spontaneous and non-rehearsed. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a well-rounded assessment that our students can, you know, so we can get the best, you know, measurement tools for best measurement, but also a means of helping them and supporting them where they're at, and also a means of progress that they can follow and that they can, you know, utilize for themselves to know where they're at in their learning. But it's also a great tool for parents to know where they're at, and also help parents understand where they're at and where they can help their students in real time, seeing their students' language results. So that's where we're at. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Great. Again, you're seeing like all the differences in the different programs and the different ways you can create and deliver your language assessments. Awesome. Very creative. So then we can get into sharing about data collection and analysis. We're almost up finished, but I just wanted to take some time because you're doing all this great work around assessing students, but really the question is once you get those assessments done, what's happening with the data and how are you utilizing it after you analyze it into maybe reflect into your program or your classrooms. And so what I wanted to ask is sort of like, we heard that there are, I guess, Navajo Prep, you're doing, is it 3 assessments throughout the year? I know Dr. Sullivan said there were multiple assessments at different
We're
times.
doing multiple assessments.
Yeah.
Through the Navajo Nation requires our 12th grade students to take 3 assessments 3 times throughout the year. So this is a nation assessment, but we also do our internal assessments that's done during class time.
Okay, thank you. And then once you collect that data, what are you doing with it? I know some of it goes to report for your OIE grant, but beyond that, what are you doing with that data? How are you utilizing it? How are you sharing it? Anyone, please come off of mute and share what you do with your data after you've collected it from your assessments.
Hello, so this is now preparatory school again. What we do is we share the information with our language teachers.
Good.
So they can, you know, this is a very formative assessment to determine where we're at, what we need to cover, but also what skill we need to reinforce. But more so, we also share with our community and stakeholders, our school board members, to see where they're at so they can better advocate for us on our behalf.
Yeah.
It's because of these results, we're able to get a 3rd Navajo language teacher, you know? And so sharing the results and being proud of our students' progress and showing that, you know, every little step counts throughout the community, and it shows that we're moving forward.
Awesome. Awesome. I know a lot of times we just think about assessments and the data going to our grant reports or into the classroom, but they are a really great tool to keep your community on board and supporting you and getting additional positions, obviously. Awesome. All righty. We're just getting ready to wrap up. Does anybody have any questions over anything that we've been talking about today?
This has been a great discussion. I really, really appreciate everybody's insights and their sharing, and I'm learning a lot myself. So I really appreciate you guys doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, we get the opportunity to read, you know, again, like your APRs and see and talk to you a little bit during the talking session. So it's been really great to hear the intricacies of your different assessments and the creative ways you are going about assessing your language. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
This is Brandon. I would agree completely with what you and Donna just said. I think each of these sort of subtopics, like just the last one about data collection and analysis, that we could go on forever about that. And I wanted to share, but there's absolutely no time. So I'm thinking these would be great, like sort of continuations for at the PD meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I will put that down on my list. Awesome. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So before we start to wrap up, I wanted to just give a little bit space. I know, Donna, did you have anything you wanted to share or say? I don't want to skip without giving you a chance.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, I'm good.
Okay. Awesome.
I appreciate that though.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I'm really happy to see as many people on here, and I see a lot of our new grantees also joining, which is even that much more enriching by having our more experienced grantees and our newest ones. So I'm really digging this conversation. So thank you again.
Me too. I am really digging it. But as we're ending up our digging this and leaving, getting ready to leave this talking circle, we'd love for you to complete this end of event poll. It just takes a couple seconds and we really do look at this data and it helps us inform. So while you're doing that, I'll move on in the slides. Again, we just wanted to, if you have any changes or additions to your staff, You want to make sure you get the information about talking circles and any events on the OIE. You can, on the OIE sort of list of events that are coming up. You can share their information, you see right there, to oie@seiservices.com. Make sure to include their name, their role, as well as their email address. And then again, our upcoming events. And so our next NAL Talking Circle will be on March 9th. We look forward to talking with you then. If you have any ideas or suggestions about what you want to discuss during these talking circles, again, please email oie@seiservices.com. We really want to make this relevant and responsive to your needs. This is your time to talk and share, and we want it to be meaningful for you folks. The other thing is on January 26th, we have our monthly upcoming office hours. For any of you new NAL grantees, if you haven't been at our office hours, it's really just that. It's a open hour. There's no agenda. You can come in. It's all of OIE grant programs, grantees that are there. We have a lot of people who just sit in and listen because sometimes you don't know the questions you need to ask. And so a lot of our grantees listen in to hear the other questions their fellow grantees are asking. And also for our new NAL grantees, we are having the OIE Grant Leadership Academy Session 2 coming up on January 16th. You should have received an invite to that. If you have not, again, please reach out to OIE@SEI Services so we can make sure we get that to you. We want to thank you again. It was a great discussion, a great talking circle, so many amazing things that you folks are doing as it relates to assessment of native language, so creative. We wanted to just share contact information for both Donna as well as Gabby, and then again, our OIE technical assistance team. You can reach out to all of those emails. Don't forget to follow OIE on Twitter at OIE Indian Ed. Remember when you do send maybe an email, some of you maybe have multiple grants, make sure you include your email at the top of your email, your PR number when you're emailing it to OIE. That way we can readily know which grants you are referring to and can better prep and address the appropriate response. Again, thank you for completing the end of event poll. You folks have a wonderful rest of your day and we'll see you again. Aloha.